Hello, gathered friends. I'm Roar Nuva, and welcome to Bionicle Deep Dive, where we analyze the tropes, characters, and lore of LEGO Bionicle. And for a special Valentine's Day episode, we are going to be counting down the top 10 horniest Bionicle characters. The fact that nearly all of the characters in the series are asexual, since sex and biological reproduction literally don't exist in the Matoran universe, has not stopped several of the characters from being clearly down bad for each other. Because even if there were no official canon romances, there were several instances in the story where clearly intended to invoke the idea of romance or attraction to the audience, even if only in a tongue-in-cheek gag kind of way. Also, this list is going to be based on canon and not headcanon. Characters who share a close bond and are often shipped together are not necessarily going to be included on this list, unless there are distinct moments that are meant to be a subtle innuendo or implication of attraction. I myself am a Kopaka Pohatu shipper till the day I die, but I acknowledge the fact that while they clearly have a deep emotional bond, there weren't any hints of physical attraction in the actual story material. We're not here for emotional attachment today, we're here for horny. Though, don't worry, the topic of romance and even shipping headcanons is something I'm definitely open to talking more about in the future. For the number 10 spot, we have Niki. Now, this was honestly a bit of a tough decision on my part since he wasn't really all that horny, but from a certain angle, his conversations with Lariska, where she convinces him to betray the other Toa, almost read as flirting. Especially when he stretches his legs out on the bench and tells Lariska to stick around and find out what his plans are once he rules the city. Very slight vibes, but they are there. Plus the instance when he bursts into Tuyet's home during her fight with Likon saying, "Hi dear, I'm home," is a funny reference to romantic comedy sitcoms that evokes the idea of attraction even if it was clearly ironic. Next on our list, at number 9, we have Mimik, a skilled Dark Hunter with the ability to copy any skill he sees. After the disappearance of his close personal friend, he was approached by the Shadowed One who told him in exchange for Mimik's loyalty, he would have his best trackers look for his friend. But what Mimik never knew was that it was the Shadowed One himself who kidnapped her, keeping her in his dungeon as motivation for his newest asset. Admittedly, not the most explicitly horny backstory, and yes, they definitely could have been purely platonic, and that would be enough. I'm a firm believer that men and women can be just close friends. But from a meta perspective, the decision to make his friend female when so few Bionicle characters were, seems to evoke the kidnapped girlfriend trope. Mimik never really appears in the story, only being shown in the Dark Hunter's guidebook as a fan entry, so we don't really know anything further about what happens to them. Alright, now we're getting into the real stuff. At number 8 and number 7, we have Hali and Jaller, grouped together because their attraction was almost exclusively to each other, and making separate entries would be redundant. One of the cutest quote-unquote couples in Bionicle, Jaller and Hali's ship set sail after the defeat of the Borak in Ga Koro. Jaller was about to leave when the normally shy Hali comes up to him and takes a flower from the side of her mask and silently puts it on his. Staring after her, Jaller then decides to stay for a little while and walks off with her. The scene was also juxtaposed with a scene of Huki and Maku, who we'll get to in a second. So the audience was already primed to view it a little romantically. Later, during the early rounds of the Koli tournament, Jaller stammers a bit when Hali visits his village, and they were seen flirting with each other in the middle of the finals during Mask of Light. Jaller is also nervous to tell her goodbye before heading out on the quest to find the 7th Toa. And Hali was told by Asir and Kokoro that the ones she loves will be destroyed, which comes true with Jaller's death near the end of the movie. Hali, of course, then uses Jaller's inspiration to unite the island, and when he's resurrected, she embraces him immediately. The flirting definitely took a backseat in the Voya Nui and Mari Nui arcs, when they become Toa, but to be fair, the universe was also going to end in a matter of days, so they really had other things to worry about. They still clearly shared a bond, but just kept the focus more to the task at hand, which I respect. I'm going to put Hali at number 8 and Jaller ever so slightly above her horniness at number 7, because there seem to be more instances of Jaller getting flustered around Hali than the other way around. Hali fell first, but Jaller fell harder. Oh yes, here we go. At number 6, Huki, and number 5, Maku. The OG Bionicle romance, Huki and Maku, also grouped together for convenience. These two were absolutely adorable in the Matsunui Online game and Borak animations by Templar. In Minog, Maku is shown to frequently leave the safety of her village to see Huki, much to the chagrin of Turaga no Kama. In her hut, Maku is shown to own with a signed poster of Huki that even says "with love" at the bottom. She also becomes worried when a plague hits Pokoro out of fear for Huki's safety. Later, when Takua visits Pokoro, Huki begins to tell him not to let Maku know he's sick, fearing she would worry for him. Later, in the Borak animations, the two are seen waving at each other while their Turaga are talking, thinking they're slick, but literally everyone sees them. And of course, their ship's best scene takes place later that night, when they're sitting together on the lily pads under the stars. Huki's worried about the Borak returning, and Maku tries to comfort him. Maku takes his hand, and they stare into each other's eyes with a shooting star in the background, and then Maku starts to lean in for what looks like a kiss, only for Jaller and the rest of the group to come in and ruin the moment. And just look at how the two scoot away and blush at each other while Jaller is oblivious. Not Takua and Hali, though. They saw you. Later in the arc, Maku is shown dragging a scared Huki off to swimming lessons, which later in his life would save him when he becomes the Toomari. In the Matsunui Online game too, Maku is shown not only with another poster of Huki, but with a small plushie of him, and Huki's hut has a plushie of her, which is the cutest stuff ever. As a Toa, Huki doesn't really talk much about Maku, though Makuta, looking into his mind, notes that he's afraid of never seeing her again, and that's a big part of his motivation to finish their mission and return home as soon as possible. Of the two, I'm putting Huki at number 6 and Maku at number 5, since of the two, Maku is definitely the more forward. At number 4, we have Citak, or should I call him Simperac, because oh damn, boy was down bad for a baddie that didn't even want him. Citak genuinely wanted to marry Roodaka and often referred to her as his queen even before the marriage was official. Granted, his primary motivation was to gain influence in Roodaka's homeland. But that doesn't change the fact that he believed all of her lying flattery and allowed himself to be manipulated in order to look impressive to her. He allowed the Roodaka to be mutated rather than killing him outright because Roodaka said it would make him more legendary. His blind following of Roodaka's compliments even led him to his death, letting Roodaka trick him into a fight with Kitangu that ended with him being flattened. And above all else, he should have known better, simply because they constantly betrayed each other in the past to win Makuta's favor, and her entire MO was scheming and manipulation. He only got his position as Vizorak King by taking credit for her accomplishments, and nothing other than sheer dumb horny could explain why he thought she would let that go. At number 3, we have Vizola. Originally one of Nokama's students, Nokama began giving Vizola more specialized attention to help improve her work, and they quickly became friends outside the classroom. But unknown to Nokama, Vizola was down bad for her teacher. Vizola improved both her grades and her sports skills to impress Nokama. But the more time they spent together, the more time Vizola wanted to spend with her, to the point where Vizola would get angry, and they would even have fights if Nokama was too busy to hang out, or worse, hung out with other friends. Vizola's feelings for Nokama seemed to be a mixture of possessiveness and envy at Nokama's prestige. Vizola's home was covered from floor to ceiling in carvings of Nokama and records of Nokama's achievements. When Nokama became a Toa, Vizola became horribly distraught at the thought that Nokama would no longer have any time for her, and would make friends with the other Toa. She tried to find the Great Disc of God Metru, hoping that it would make her the one that people admired, and Nokama the one who was ignored. This drove her into falling into an obvious trap, and nearly being killed until Nokama rescued her. It's also interesting that one of the most blatant examples of an obsessive crush in the series was pretty gay. Alright. At the number 2 spot, I'm giving it to Roodaka, and I think it's no surprise that she got very high on this list. Particularly in the movie, Roodaka is played as a femme fatale, using very suggestive charm in order to win over and manipulate both Citak and Vakama. Particularly with Citak, she used her engagement with him to blind him to her true motives. And the way she talks to and touches Vakama when they first meet feels very, bondage and dominatrixy. Not only that, she seemed to display not only a genuine loyalty, but even a deep admiration of Makuta, coming off at times as almost infatuation. There's only so many ways you can read her gently holding the Makuta stone to her chest while whispering, "Soon, Makuta." And then, of course, there's her appearance, which seemed to be deliberately designed to evoke a somewhat sexy female body type, somewhat in the set and especially in the movie. Raka is perhaps the single most sexualized character in all of Bionicle, something the fanbase certainly ran away with considering certain genre of mocks. And that fairly overwhelming air of sexuality surrounding her character is what puts her near the top of this list. And frankly, I wouldn't be mad at you if we put her at the top of your own personal list. Which, we all have, right? Right? Ranking discontinued Lego robots from 20 years ago by how horny are they is definitely a normal, well-adjusted thing that adults do, right? Let's keep going. But before I get to my pick for the true Horniest Bionicle, we've got to get to an honorable mention. I'm putting all of the Spherus Magnans, like the Glatorian and Agori, as honorable mentions. It's been confirmed that since they are naturally occurring organic creatures, they do reproduce biologically, and therefore can experience sexual attraction. Particular shout out to Shamad, who is the only completely canon, unambiguous romance in the series, occasionally referring to the woman he loved that died in the dreaming plague that killed the Iron Tribe. Especially since Greg Farsi wrote this after firmly stating the MU characters don't have romance, so he put this in there deliberately to show that the Baramagnans were different. I suppose we can also include the Akodans from Generation 2 here, since again they are shown to have marriages and even biological children. So yes, they do canonically fuck, but where's the fun in that? I'm here for the asexual robots who don't have even a concept of what sex is, but somehow still desperately want to bone. And speaking of, I think it's time we get to our number one spot. And for the number one Horniest Bionicle, it is Matau. I'm sure many of you saw this coming. There's not a single Bionicle character as unabashedly and earnestly horny as Mr. Handsome-looking himself. While Roodaka, for example, may have had more sexuality infused with her character, she mainly used it for manipulation, whereas Matau was far more genuine in his desires. Throughout the entire Metro Nui arc, he is constantly flirting with or trying to impress Nokama with his showboating. Honestly, counting every instance where Matau displayed a desire to be with Nokama may deserve a video unto itself, but I feel the need to at least list some of the most notable examples. Like in Legends of Metro Nui, where he tells her he sees them going on a romantic ride drive, or him insisting on carrying Nokama himself when she gets poisoned by the Rahi Nui. In Challenge of the Hordika, a group of Vizirac spiders use mimicry of Nokama's screams to trick him into letting them in. His internal monologue stated that he thought of Nokama as a friend, and at times wished she could be more than that. Iruni pleaded with Matau that it was a trick, but hearing Nokama's voice in pain overrode his rationality. Or two extremely notable instances in the Web of Shadows novelization. The first, when they are about to fall to their deaths, when Matau says, "Nokama, I want you, no, I need you to know that I've always," and then he gets cut off by the fall. Now, we don't know exactly what he was going to say, but it sounds a lot like he was going to say that he always loved her. And the second instance is later in the book, when Matau makes a nest while he was on watch duty. He described a strange urge to make a nest. Nokama commiserates with him that she has also been feeling unexplainable urges ever since their transformation into Toho Hordika. And in one of the most out-of-pocket lines in all of the series, Matau then asks, hopefully, if any of her urges involve him. Is this even allowed? Thankfully, they seem to have chilled out as Turaga. Bionicle did not need the pervy old man trope. But that is my list of the horniest Bionicle characters. I hope you'll forgive me for this somewhat unusual deep dive, but this idea has been swimming in my head for literally years now, and it was just too funny to pass up. Let me know in the comments what you think of this list, or if there's any characters you think should be included. The topic of romance and sex in Bionicle has become such a meme in the fanbase over the years, and frankly, there's a lot of interesting depth to it, despite the firm statements from Greg and LEGO that these things aren't a part of the Bionicle universe. And keep an eye out for next Valentine's Day when I do a more in-depth look at the ideas of romance within the series. I'll see you all soon. Take care, my gathered friends.